If worldwide affairs have a place in your day, this is the place you will want to stay. The Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast with your host, world-renowned voice of Garvey and global news commentator, Ron Bobb-Semple.
Greetings and welcome to the Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast. We will be addressing global issues that impact our day-to-day lives.
Marine conservation is the protection and preservation of ecosystems in oceans and seas through planned management in order to prevent the over-exploitation of these resources. Joining us are Conservationist and President of the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, Annette Arjoon-Martins, and Marine Biologist, a Gen X member of the Conservation Society, Felicia Collins. Greetings to both of you and welcome to the Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Annette, you firmly believe that environmental education at an early age is critical for the success of conservation efforts. Who was responsible for this encouragement for you as a child?
For me, environmental education wasn't necessarily in a formal sense as we think of it today. For me, my environmental education was in a very practical sense, and this was ingrained in me at a very early age by my maternal grandmother, who was an Arawak from the Amerindian village of Santa Rosa, who I was very privileged to have grown up with, who inculcated into me at a very early age the care and love and respect for all things natural. So I think that was a very pivotal foundation for me in terms of serving me well for what I later became.
What is the function of the Guyana Marine Conservation Society?
So the Guyana Marine Turtle Conservation Society, which was the original name of the NGO that I founded in 2000, was established to basically look at the conservation and management of the sea turtles that came to nest in our Shell Beach shores in Region 1 every year from March to August. It was established purely for enabling sea conservation efforts, but very early on in our existence, we were asked by the Environmental Protection Agency to lead a process of Shell Beach becoming a protected area. And then it grew there from just focusing on a species of sea turtle and sea turtle conservation to the holistic protection of the habitat in which these sea turtles were found. So we became an organization that dealt with the establishment of Guyana's first and only coastal protected area, the Shell Beach Protected Area in 2011. And then we branched out into other areas of work, such as community development, of course, heightened environmental education and awareness and research. So we have a very broad mandate. And then in 2014, we noticed that sperm whales started washing up on a very regular basis. Inexplicably, we don't have the facilities to establish their cause of death. And it was then that we decided we'll rename the organization. So we dropped the turtle, and then we basically took on a wider mandate and became the Guyana Marine Conservation Society. And it's why I'm so thrilled that we have started 2021 with a slew of young professionals in the marine environment with the relevant marine expertise, such as Felicia and her other outstanding colleagues.
Dr. Raquel Thomas Cesar, the tropical forest ecologist and director of resource management and training at the Irocrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development in Guyana, said, quote, "Globally, it is estimated that only 30% of scientists are women. I'm confident over the next few decades, these numbers will increase, but we must create the space to encourage our girls to not only engage, but also stay in science fields." Unquote. What did you see in one Felicia Collins that caused you to make the decision to take her under your wings?
Actually, I want to make it very clear, very early up front, that it was Felicia Collins who saw in me and our organization, an organization in which she would be a natural fit. So it was here, her young, very early days of pursuing her academic studies, saw that it was a natural fit for the style of work she was hoping to do. It was Felicia basically seeing that the Guyana Marine Conservation Society was a good fit for her, not me seeing Felicia at all. However, I was thrilled that she saw that the organization that she wanted to be a part of, because from the first day I engaged with her, I just saw in her the tremendous potential and capacity. And within a very short while, her actions spoke louder than her words when she had first engaged with me. And we have some other youngsters like her as well too. Ivana Thompson from University of West Indies, Jamaica, who's about to complete her master's in marine and terrestrial ecosystems. Maria Fraser, who just came back to Guyana with her master's in marine science. So they're a bunch of remarkable young marine scientists, and I could not be more privileged than to be in their company because I learn a lot from them as well.
Felicia Collins, as project coordinator at the Marine Conservation Society, you have been described as a highly self-motivated and environmental biologist with strong interpersonal skills and a passion for protecting the environment and indigenous development. How did growing up in Region 1 section of Guyana impact your development?
Well, thank you for that question. So growing up in Region 1, it was definitely quite the experience, and of course, very different from growing up on the coast in Georgetown. For one, it's a rural community. So, we didn't have the fancy technology. We didn't have like these tar roads. It was a very simple way of life. And I really appreciated that, just growing up very minimalist, I would say. And it has shaped a lot of who I have become and the career path that I have chosen today, because I've always been a nature enthusiast because of where I grew up, always being outdoors and, exploring. And now that I'm able to pursue that as a career, I just have more of an appreciation for it.
In learning and studying marine organisms and what their lives are like in their natural habitats, what are some of the challenges you have been faced with in the land of many waters?
Well, studying marine biology in Trinidad and Tobago, it was very nice, of course, because the marine environment there is very different from Guyana. So they have their clear blue waters and, you can go out, you see the corals and you see all the colorful fishes and everything. That's what you think of when you think of marine biology. You think of just the diverse marine life out there. And I got the opportunity to see that while I was studying in Trinidad. But coming back to Guyana, it was a bit different because, of course, our marine environment is different from Trinidad. We don't have the pristine blue waters as the rest of the Caribbean. So it is challenging in that sense that we cannot see our marine environment to appreciate it enough to want to study it more. But that does not say because we cannot see it, the things or the organisms are not there and they're no less important than the ones that we can see. So I think one of the challenges that I have here in Guyana with marine biology is just that ability to go out there and to easily access our marine environment as I had in Trinidad. And of course, also our marine environment is so huge. It's not just 50 miles of a stretch of land. It's 430 kilometers wide. So definitely the space and the biology is just so different and so diverse from what I learned. It's a lot of relearning for me here.
Annette, is this a field that young people gravitate towards? If not, are there concerted efforts being made to have more of them pursue this field, what with the emphasis that is being put on climate change globally?
Definitely, it's not a field where I think there is a concerted effort to have more youngsters pursue careers in this particular field. In a time of great relevance, not only from a very macro sort of perspective of climate change and its obvious impacts on a low-lying coastline, like Felicia referred to, 431 kilometers along a very compromised coastline, but also, more importantly, in a time of oil and gas, where all of these activities are offshore, and we certainly need at least a dozen of marine biologists, marine scientists to do all of the requisite work that is necessary, not only in the regulatory agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency or the soon-to-be Oil Commission and the Natural Resource Agency, but also in the businesses of ExxonMobil and all of their service service providers that need such requisite sort of expertise. So I think in terms of having a very structured way of how do we look at getting more young people pursue their relevant studies, but also very, very important, which is always missing, I find, whilst you're pursuing your academic studies, there is real need for practical sort of internships, local counterpart placements, for example. And I'll share a very personal story here. So as you would know, the last 30 years of my life has been spent in the marine conservation field with our protection of sea turtles and then the shellfish protected area. And in 2015, I met with the ExxonMobil focal person. I think at that time it was Michael Passad. And I said, look, your protected species observers that are coming into Guyana, for example, they go out on their vessels that are doing the seismic surveys or the drill ships, because they have to have these protected species observers. They're looking out for if there are any whales or any other sort of marine life that could be impacted by their activities. Then they have to basically, shut down until that marine mammal is far away enough. And I said to them, when these guys are in the country, we don't have a clue what's offshore. When they come back on shore, can they meet with us, the members of the Guyana Marine Conservation Society, and tell us, okay, if we are doing our seismics in November to January, what types of whales did we see? What types of marine birds did we see? So, and then show us the photographs so we could start orienting ourselves to the life offshore. Unfortunately, that never happened. And I met with them again and I said, look, is it possible that, you could look at having some of our sea turtle rangers, for example, who are already working in a marine environment, even though they're on the beaches, patrolling the beaches, they're also on the ocean doing ocean patrols to ensure that the fishing nets weren't in areas where sea turtles become entangled and drown because sea turtles need to breathe air. I said, could you look at also training some of our sea turtle rangers to become protected species observers? So at least we now have a chance of getting involved in this new sector and keeping an eye out for the marine life offshore that we need to protect. It took another couple of years before this was accommodated. And I would want to acknowledge that it was accommodated eventually. And we had one of our main sea turtle ranger at the time and the camp manager, Romeo De Freitas. He was part of the training. Subsequently, we had his son, Alex De Freitas, and then his daughter, Rebecca. Some youngsters from Warapoka. Can't remember the names right now. Dave Fredericks and his family that got trained as well. And they are now offshore being, very functional as protected species observers. But even though it's a good start, it's nearly not enough that is needed. So having people like Felicia on board now and having that done in a much more systematic way. For example, Felicia is going to talk about a project, a very exciting project she's doing right now, where she has some young, bright teachers working with her. And I could see all four of them being easy shoo-ins to become trained as protected species observers. So they could also be involved in this new sector. I know I sort of diverted a bit, but to answer your question, I don't think that there's enough structure to have more persons pursue the relevant studies in this area. And then also, most importantly, to have those practical attachments. Because if you did a survey right now, and I saw a letter in today's Starbuck News from a young girl from Blackbush Polder speaking about, her parents couldn't afford for her to be educated and what's going on in their community. But you could multiply that by 100 times. Because if you look right now and you looked at all of the environmental studies graduates from 2 years back, or all the biology students graduates from 2 years back, how many of them are actually gainfully employed in the areas they studied? This is a crucial area that we need to look at, whether through the focal ministries for these kids when they graduate, where they're placed, before they graduate, where they are interned. Because a lot of the companies also would say, okay, you have the academic requirement, but you don't have the relevant work experience. So it's a catch-22. But I would ask Felicia to expound on that a bit more, because I think she's also very aware of some of the avenues that her colleagues need to have addressed, so they could also benefit from.
Well, Felicia, Annette has made things very easy for me. Could you share with us this exciting project that you are involved in right now?
I am currently the project coordinator of the Barima Moor Passage Mammal Survey. The Barima Moor Passage is basically of interest to us because it is in the region with, of course, the most intact mangrove forest system in Guyana, which is Region 1. And we found this particular area of importance. So we decided that we were going to set a few camera traps I set a few camera traps to increase our understanding of the large and medium-bodied mammals within the area. So there are a few important species, IUCN species such as the jaguar and the puma. But in addition to that, you have a lot of game species such as the tapir, the lava, the wild hog, that are the livelihoods of the people that live in that area depend on. So myself and two other researchers, Matt Hallett from the University of Florida and Fernando Lai from the Rupununi Wildlife Center from Region 9, we went into Region 1 in February and we set 30 camera traps. Now, while doing this, we decided to include 5 youngsters from the area who would be our field assistants. And we saw this of importance just to not only build the local capacity there, but to give the young persons there who are also interested in conservation, to have an avenue to explore that passion. Where we were planning to teach them how to set the camera traps, to use the GPS, and to just give them that firsthand experience of what we as researchers do while we're in the field. We found 5 persons who were more than willing and enthusiastic to come on board with us on this trip. And as a resident of Region 1, it really made me feel accomplished, because I would have loved if I had gotten that opportunity, and to be able to go back home and to give that opportunity to students who were really interested in this area was something that it was very fulfilling. So I must thank GMCS and our sponsors, ARA, for allowing me to be a part of this project and allowing me for also including some of the local capacity and that local content and bring that sense of ownership to the people who actually live there. So the aim of this project is to basically provide a preliminary assessment of the mammals within that area so that we can nominate the site hopefully as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its importance, not just ecologically, but also socially and culturally as well. We hope that when we retrieve the camera traps, we could then analyze the data and understand the distribution and the activity patterns of these mammals. We're also hoping to assess natural variation, the impact of natural variation and local human activity, such as farming and hunting on these animals. And finally, and I think one that would be the most interesting, is that we're hoping to assess the impact of a potential offshore oil spill on this area. So we're going to combine some data, wind speed, tides, and the flow of the river to see how far the oil would travel downstream and how much it would affect the wildlife within the area.
What is your ultimate goal as a marine biologist?
Well, I think my ultimate goal would be to do research on behalf of my country, and these baselines that are so needed, especially in the time, as Annette mentioned, where oil and gas is something that we're now embarking on. But we need to have transparency, we need to know what is out there. We need to know what we have, our marine resources, and how we can protect them. So I would say at the end of the day, if my work can contribute to conserving a particular area or habitats or ecosystem, that would ultimately feed into better livelihoods, because we know in Guyana, we depend so much on our fisheries industry. And if something is to happen, or our marine environment is to become compromised, then it's not just the environment that we stand to lose, but people who depend on the environment for those livelihoods. So I'm just hoping as a marine biologist, if at the end of the day, my work can contribute to preserving and conserving our environment, I would say, my work is done.
It should be noted that Guyana's offshore basin and the inland Takatu Basin have attracted foreign companies such as Shell and Mobil since the 1940s. Offshore exploration began in the 1950s, and 9 wells were drilled between 1965 and 1970, only one of which struck oil. What does it say that Guyana is one of the few countries in the world that still has pristine rainforest habitat?
Who's that question for?
Either one of you.
I would want to say that, look, through the exemplary stewardship of our terrestrial natural resources, in this case, the forests, which basically put Guyana on the global map as a best example of how it could be done. How could you mobilize your forests, for example, in your country's development, and also the whole creation of the low carbon development strategy in early 2009, and us being paid for the services of those forests over 5 years. I think it was $250 million US that was garnered. I think in terms of where we are today in this very pivotal moment, it gives us a beautiful opportunity to repeat what we did with our terrestrial natural resources in our marine environment. And this is where Felicia mentioned, for example, our ultimate goal is to do the scientific research that will be necessary to have those baselines established. Because if you haven't measured what you have offshore, how can you monitor it and how can you manage it? So getting those requisite, marine environmental scientific research, real research that's done year round, not just opportunistically. If you have a seismic going on, you capture a couple months data and then you try to call that scientific research. So I think having those baselines done in a very systematic, sustainable, and scientific manner will allow Guyana to now be able to use that sound scientific data to not only monitor the marine life, but also to manage it. So, we always say that if you don't know what you have, how can you monitor or manage? In a larger context, most Guyanese only associate the Atlantic Ocean with either the bangameri that we all eat or the gilbaka that a few of us could afford. But, there's not much wider awareness of what we have out there. And I'm fearful that if we don't recognize what we have out there, we will care very little if it's impacted or lost. So having young marine scientists like Felicia, who's from Region 1, who's working and collecting the data in this very important mangrove forested area she referred to, as well as most importantly, working with younger Region 1 residents in that exercise, she's not doing what has been done in the past, go out there and do the data collection and then beat out and take all of that knowledge out of the area. She's actually working with young people in the area so that capacity is built in the region and it remains in the region. And I really want to take my hat off to her at such a young age, seeing the importance of having the capacity built within Region 1. And also, she's very modest, so she's not going to say this, and I want to acknowledge that she has gone beyond the project she's working on right now and has actually created opportunities in another project for some of those youngsters. So Felicia, I take my hat off to you literally just now and figuratively now to say that you are already doing within a year what some people don't do in 5 years or even in their lifetimes, and this is where we're going to be making the difference slowly but surely.
Wow, what a compliment. Before we wrap up, Felicia, how valuable are the mangroves to not only Guyana, but other countries? It's sad that 3/4 of Guyana's mangroves have been removed.
Thank you, Annette, for that, first of all. Our mangroves are really important. They provide a number of ecosystem services, whether it's cultural, regulating, provisioning, supporting services. They are particularly important to the people who live there or live on the coast because they provide the direct benefit of sea defense. They serve as an important nursery for a lot of important fish species, not just the ones that local people depend on, but also commercial fish species. And that is what makes them also so important to our neighboring countries, such as the ones in Trinidad, Suriname, and even Venezuela, because fish, of course, is a very migratory species. And our mangroves here, the ones particularly in Region 1, because they're so intact, they serve as what you would call a source population. So the fishes would usually come there, they would spawn, breed, and then they would go out into high seas. And the fishermen in Trinidad and in Venezuela and those other countries would catch them. So these ecosystems, they're all very connected. We tend to look at them as isolated ecosystems, but they're not. Of course, the environment and these species don't recognize borders, national borders. So what happens in Guyana and how we protect and preserve our environment in Guyana will have effects not just locally, but also regionally and potentially globally. So I think the importance of these mangroves, it's hard to quantify. We can't put a direct figure or a direct value to them, but they are very important. And there should be more of an effort to raise awareness as to why these mangroves are important, how they contribute to our livelihoods, how they contribute to our economy, and how they contribute to the overall fight against climate change.
Annette, how much governmental support does the Guyana Marine Conservation Society get?
In 2000, when we were founded, Prime Minister Samuel Hines was our patron, and he was actually asked to be our patron specifically because he actually walked the talk when the Shell Beach area was very attractive to a company that wanted to extract the shells for fertilizer, we lobbied that he was very instrumental in having that not happen. Because you can imagine what would have happened if the shells and the beaches were collected to be turned into fertilizer. It would have decimated the nesting beaches available to sea turtles. So it was because Prime Minister Hines had actually enabled us to put a stop to that. We asked him to be the patron. And he was an incredible patron for the 15 years that he served as patron on our board from 2000 to 2015, where he opened all the doors that we needed to have opened. For example, we were able to show Minister Saw at the time a map with 64 turtles that had drowned in the very early part of the season. And we asked for a no-netting area to be set up, which greatly reduced the amount of turtles that were dying during the season. The Coast Guard were very important in terms of taking our ranges and the ocean patrols to ensure that the no-netting ban and the areas that were, off limits were being complied with. So we received tremendous support during that period. We didn't get as much traction in the 2015 to 2020 period that I would have wished. That is gone, and we should look forward. Moving forward, we actually just signed a MOU with an organization called EMC, Environmental Management Consultants, and the focal minister, Minister Vikram Bharat, graced us with his presence. Felicia was the chairperson who I think blew everybody away and impressed everyone at that very important event. And he basically committed unconditional support for whatever this new MOU was embarking on. And I think that speaks volumes in terms of the obvious goodwill, in terms of what our focal ministries will enable. And I'm really, really excited on this new period we're going to move forward in. Not only having, youngsters like Felicia and her sister colleagues who are all marine scientists, but also the collaboration with environmental consultants, management consultants, and other organizations such as Global Fishing Watch, which is an international NGO, American, that is basically providing us with real-time satellite imagery offshore that we in the past could not have even dreamt of, much less afforded. So here things are really beginning to blossom for us, not only in terms of the governmental support we're getting, the new partnerships we're forming, but also unprecedented access to technology, which is going to be a huge game changer in terms of how we move forward. So I'm really excited. I'm so thankful. I feel so blessed to be able to wake up and do what I do. And I know that with people like Felicia on board with us, I could really pass the torch now and not even be concerned about where the Guyana Marine Conservation Society will go in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, Felicia Collins, I recently met you, and I'm extremely proud of what you have been doing, you and your team. Annette showed her pride by physically taking her hat off to you, and I'm sure she is very elated with the progress that you and your team have been making. Annette Arjoon-Martins and Felicia Collins, thank you very much for joining me here on the Ron Bobb-Semple International podcast, enlightening us with information about the importance of marine conservation. Knowledge is the most powerful antiseptic. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you for having me, Ron.
I thank you, and you both do the same. Thank you for spending some time with us. If you are so inclined, you can subscribe to these podcasts and donate to them by clicking on the Support the Show button on the website. Please continue to protect yourself and your loved ones during this global pandemic by observing all protocols. Be safe, be strong, and be aware. I'm Ron Bobb-Semple.